The day started like any other for Daniel. He was running late for work, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, scrolling through emails he'd already read twice. The streets of downtown Portland were gray and damp, the kind of cold that made people pull their collars higher and look down. But as Daniel rushed past the corner near Pine and 8th, he noticed a man sitting against the brick wall of an old bookstore, a homeless man, shivering, his face hidden beneath a ragged hood. Normally, Daniel would have walked right by. He wasn't proud of it, but over the years, the city's endless faces of hardship had numbed him. You can't save everyone, he often told himself. But something about this man made him stop. Maybe it was the way his hands trembled as he tried to light a cigarette, or maybe it was the way he was staring, not at people, but at the American flag painted on the opposite wall, faded and cracked but still there. Daniel hesitated, feeling the tug of conscience he hadn't felt in years. He sighed and walked over. "Hey, man," he said gently. "You okay?" The man looked up slowly. His eyes were pale blue, clouded by fatigue but still alert, military eyes, Daniel thought. "Just cold," the man muttered. "And hungry, if I'm honest." Daniel nodded. "Hang on." He turned and ducked into the coffee shop next door, coming back with 2 steaming cups and a sandwich wrapped in foil. "Here," he said, handing one to him. "Turkey Club. It's not much, but it's warm." The man's cracked lips twitched into a faint smile. "You didn't have to do that." "Maybe not," Daniel said. "But I wanted to." They sat there for a few minutes in silence, the city moving around them. People walked by without looking, like ghosts passing through light. Daniel watched as the man ate slowly, carefully, as if savoring every bite. "What's your name?" Daniel finally asked. "Mike," the man said after a pause. "Mike Rourke. I'm Daniel. Nice to meet you, Daniel." They talked a bit, about the weather, the rising cost of rent, the unfairness of how people fell through the cracks. Mike didn't say much about himself, just hinted at things, something about a bad run, losing everything, and not being the same since the desert. Daniel didn't press him, but his instincts were right. Mike was a veteran. He could see it in the posture, the precision with which he folded the sandwich wrapper, the way his eyes scanned the street like he was still on watch. As Daniel stood to leave, Mike extended his hand. It was rough, calloused, and trembling slightly. Daniel gripped it firmly. "Thanks," Mike said quietly. "Not many people stop." Daniel smiled. "Take care, Mike." He walked away, but something gnawed at him all day. The man's eyes, his politeness, that strange sadness that felt too familiar. Later that week, Daniel found himself at the same spot again. Mike was there, same wall, same tattered jacket. This time, Daniel brought extra food, some clothes, even an old jacket he didn't wear anymore. Mike seemed embarrassed but grateful. "Man, you don't have to keep doing this," Mike said softly. "Maybe I don't," Daniel replied, "but I want to." "You deserve better." Mike laughed quietly. "Deserve's a funny word. The world doesn't care what we deserve anymore." Daniel sat down beside him. "Maybe, but I do." As Mike turned his head to look at him, his sleeve slipped slightly up his arm, and that's when Daniel saw it. A tattoo. It was faded, but unmistakable. A black eagle perched on a skull, clutching a dagger in its talons, with the words, "1st Recon Battalion, USMC," inked beneath it. Daniel's heart skipped. He knew that symbol. He'd seen it before, years ago. He couldn't speak for a moment, just stared. Mike noticed and tugged his sleeve back down. "Old memory," he muttered. Daniel swallowed hard. "1st Recon, you served in Iraq." Mike nodded slowly, his eyes now guarded. "Yeah, Fallujah, 2004. Daniel froze. His mind went back to a name, a story his brother used to tell. Daniel's older brother, Matthew, had served in that same unit. He used to talk about his best friend, Rourke. Sergeant Mike Rourke, the man who had saved his life when their convoy was ambushed. Daniel's throat went dry. "Mike Rourke," he whispered again. You served with Matthew Price." Mike's eyes flicked up, sharp and uncertain. "Price," he repeated. Then realization washed over his face like a wave. "Matt Price's kid brother." Daniel nodded, his chest tightening. "Yeah, I'm his brother." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The street noise faded into nothing, just 2 men staring at each other, one in disbelief, the other in quiet shock. Finally, Mike looked down. "Your brother, he was a good man." His voice broke slightly. "I'm sorry, I tried to save him." Daniel's breath hitched. "You were there." Mike nodded. "He didn't make it, but he made sure the rest of us did." Daniel sat heavily beside him, his hands trembling now too. He'd grown up idolizing Matthew. The news of his death had shattered their family. His parents never really recovered. And now, sitting in front of him, was the man who had fought beside him, the man his brother had died protecting. Mike pulled back his sleeve again and looked at the tattoo, tracing the faded lines with his finger. "We all got this ink together before the deployment. We thought it made us invincible." He laughed weakly. "Turns out it just made us easier to recognize." Daniel felt something heavy stir in his chest, grief, gratitude, confusion all at once. "All these years," he said softly, "you've been out here, alone." Mike shrugged. "VA paperwork got lost. PTSD hit hard. I didn't want help. Didn't think I deserved it." Daniel looked at him for a long time, his eyes stinging. He realized in that moment that fate had brought him there, not by chance, but for a reason. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a photo he still carried, a picture of Matthew in uniform, smiling beside his unit. He handed it to Mike. Mike's hand trembled as he took it. That's the day before the ambush," he whispered. "I didn't think I'd ever see this again." Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "Then maybe it's time you came home." Mike looked up, eyes glistening. "Home, yeah," Daniel said firmly. "My home, for now. We'll figure the rest out later." Mike's lip quivered. He looked like he wanted to refuse, but the weight of years seemed to press him down. Finally, he nodded, and as they stood, Daniel felt the cold wind shift, almost warmer somehow, as if his brother was right there beside him, smiling. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear: this moment, this meeting, had changed everything. The tattoo wasn't just ink. It was a sign, a message from the past that the circle wasn't broken yet. It was just waiting to be completed. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The image of Mike sitting alone on that cold sidewalk replayed in his mind over and over. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the tattoo, the eagle, the skull, and the dagger, like a ghost from his past that refused to fade. He had grown up hearing stories about Sergeant Rourke, his brother's brave friend who saved half the unit during an ambush. His parents had mentioned his name a few times at the funeral, but after the war, they lost contact with everyone. Daniel had always assumed Mike had gone on to live a normal life. But the reality was sitting just 2 blocks away from his apartment, starving and forgotten. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He packed a duffel bag with some clothes, extra toiletries, and an old Marine Corps sweatshirt his brother had left behind. He didn't know if it would mean something to Mike, but he hoped it would. When he reached the corner where he had first seen him, the spot was empty. His heart sank. He looked around, scanning every doorway, every alley. For a moment, he thought he'd lost him. Then, from across the street, he spotted a figure sitting near the bus stop, the same ragged jacket, same tired posture. "Mike," Daniel called. The man looked up, confused for a second, then smiled weakly. "You again?" "Yeah," Daniel said, catching his breath. "You didn't think I'd just forget, did you?" Mike chuckled quietly. "Wouldn't blame you if you did." Daniel shook his head. "Come on, man, I've got a couch. It's warm, and there's food. No strings." Mike hesitated. His eyes darted between Daniel and the ground. I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be. You saved my brother's life. Let me save yours, just a little." For a long moment, Mike didn't move. Then, slowly, he stood. The decision seemed to weigh on him like armor, heavy but necessary. The walk back to Daniel's apartment was silent, except for the sounds of traffic and the crunch of their boots on the pavement. Inside, Daniel handed him a towel and showed him to the bathroom. "Hot shower's yours," he said. "Take your time." When Mike came out an hour later, clean-shaven and wearing the Marine sweatshirt, Daniel barely recognized him. His face looked younger, the blue in his eyes brighter. For the first time, he didn't look invisible. They sat at the kitchen table over steaming bowls of chili. Mike ate slowly, as if afraid the food might vanish. "You ever talk about it?" Daniel asked quietly. Mike stared into his bowl. "About the war, not much. People don't really want to hear. They like the hero stories, not the nightmares." "I do," Daniel said softly. Mike looked up. His eyes glistened with a mixture of gratitude and pain. "Your brother, Matt, he was one of the good ones. Brave, funny, always trying to keep morale up. He had this stupid joke about how he'd open a barbecue joint after the war. Said he'd name it, Smokin' Freedom." Daniel smiled through the lump in his throat. "Yeah, He used to talk about that when he called home. We were ambushed near Ramadi, Mike continued, voice trembling. IED hit the lead Humvee. Everything went to hell. I was thrown out, bleeding bad. Matt pulled me behind the truck, returned fire until the medevac came. He didn't make it out. But I did. Silence filled the room. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator broke it. I tried writing your family, Mike said quietly. But I couldn't face it. Guilt's a funny thing. It makes you run from the people who might forgive you. Daniel reached across the table and put a hand on his arm. He'd be proud you're still here. My parents, they'd want to thank you. You don't owe anyone an apology. Mike blinked back tears. You don't know how long it's been since someone said that. Days turned into weeks. Mike started to heal, not just physically, but inside. Daniel helped him file paperwork with the VA, and soon Mike began getting his benefits reinstated. He got a haircut, new clothes, and started volunteering at a local shelter for other veterans. Every morning, Daniel found him sitting on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. Feels good to see the world from up here again, he'd say. Better than from the pavement. One afternoon, Daniel came home to find Mike cleaning the apartment. He was scrubbing the counter, humming softly. You don't have to do that, Daniel said. Mike shrugged. Helps me feel useful. Then he smiled. Besides, I always told your brother I'd pay him back someday. Guess this is the next best thing. Daniel chuckled. He'd probably make you mow the lawn, too. Mike laughed, and for a moment, the years of pain seemed to lift off his shoulders. As time passed, word spread about the veteran who had turned his life around. A local news station did a small segment on him, how a stranger's kindness helped him find his footing again. The story went viral. Messages poured in from across the country, old Marines, families of soldiers, even people who'd seen the video and felt inspired to help veterans in their own cities. One night, after the segment aired, Daniel found Mike sitting quietly on the couch, holding the framed photo of his unit. You okay? Daniel asked. Mike nodded slowly, just thinking about them, about how many of us didn't make it back whole. He pointed to the tattoo on his arm. We got this because we thought it meant brotherhood. Turns out, brotherhood doesn't end when the war does. Sometimes it just finds new ways to keep you alive. Daniel swallowed hard. I think that's what my brother would have wanted. Mike smiled faintly. You know, I used to pray that I'd see a sign that I was forgiven. Maybe that's what you were, Daniel. My sign. Daniel looked at him, speechless. You saved him once. Guess it was my turn to save you. The two men sat there in silence, the weight of years melting away. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant stars, the sound of traffic humming softly below. Months later, on Veterans Day, Mike stood on a small stage at a local community center. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the microphone. Daniel sat in the front row, his parents beside him, tears in their eyes. I spent a long time believing my life ended in Iraq, Mike began. But one act of kindness changed everything. A stranger saw me, not as a problem, not as a statistic, but as a man who needed a hand. He paused, his voice breaking. That man gave me something no government or paycheck ever could, a reason to live again. The crowd erupted in applause. Mike stepped down, eyes glistening, and Daniel hugged him tight. When they left the center, the cold night air hit them, but neither cared. They walked side by side, two brothers not by blood but by fate. As they crossed the street, Daniel glanced at Mike's sleeve, where the tattoo peeked through. It no longer looked like a scar of the past, it looked like a mark of survival. And for the first time in years, Mike smiled without pain. Sometimes, Daniel thought, you don't find miracles, they find you. And this one had a name, a history, and an eagle tattoo that would never fade again.